Hello, I'm David Wilson, a senior account executive with ReadTech Life Sciences. I work on the pharmaceutical team here at ReadTech and assist organizations with getting established with the various services that we provide to help streamline the Health Level 7 SPL data management, data preparation, and data submission process. Many times, organizations that reach out to us for the first time are either bringing their first product to the market or have scenarios where they have had trouble with managing this type of information. So really what I'd like to focus on here today is help you understand a little bit more about the NDC assignment process, how to get an NDC labeler code, and some of the best practices when managing NDC codes. So as I mentioned, many times, the first thing we're speaking to organizations about is, are you bringing your first product to the market, your first drug product to the US? And the first and foremost, what these organizations have to do is establish a labeler code. That's a two-step process in which you are communicating the technical Health Level 7 SPL file to the FDA. In between those two submissions, the FDA communicates back and forth to the primary point of contact on that technical file, questions, ensuring that the information that's being received by the FDA is valid, the request for the labeler code is valid, and then the FDA assigns the labeler code to the organization. Many times it will be private label distributors that are applying for new labeler codes. However, both the manufacturers of the products and the distributors of the products are required to register NDC codes, especially if those organizations are not one and the same, right? So if an organization is not manufacturing the product that they distribute, both the manufacturer and the distributor have to actually register NDC codes for that specific product. It is a complicated and kind of redundant process, but it's the best way to track and ensure the safety and efficacy of these products and where they're coming from. So as I mentioned, both organizations have these requirements, and the FDA is assigning you the labeler code. Now, there are three segments to an NDC code. That first segment is the labeler code that represents the organization. The second segment is the product code. And the third segment is the packaging code. So a product code, this middle segment of the code will represent what product has been registered. And then that third segment, the packaging code, will represent what packaging level of a product it might be. So if an organization is selling products in, let's say a hand sanitizer, right? That's been very topical these days in the over-the-counter industry, consumer products. If it's a hand sanitizer, that might come in 2-ounce bottles, in a gallon bottle. Those product codes can be the same as long as the drug facts and the formulation of the product are the same, but it can have different packaging codes. Now, the first and foremost, what you want to do when determining what our NDC code should be for our products is determine what format of the codes you'd like to use. So an organization today can utilize, if you're getting a labeler code today, it's likely it will be a 5-digit code. So you can either choose a 5-digit code, it'll be a 5-digit code with a 4-digit product code or a 1-digit packaging code. What this allows you to do is have many product code options, right? So you can have many products on the market under a single labeler code. This tends to be the best practice for huge organizations, right? Organizations that just have thousands of products, hundreds of products. It ensures that you have flexibility in your code structure to constantly expand your products, or even manufacturers that you might work with. The other option is a 532 format. So the product code would be 3 digits and the packaging code would be 2 digits. This allows for less product code variations, but it allows for more packaging level variations. So again, it's something important to keep in mind when reviewing this information. Most important to remember with this then is that you must stick to that format once you've chosen a format. 532, 541, you always have to stick with it after you've registered your first NDC code with a drug listing. So, once you have determined how your NDC codes will be formatted, how you're going to be managing that process. It's a best practice to document that. Ensure that you know exactly what your process is. So for organizations that may have various types of products, you could essentially can earmark specific product code levels for those different products, whether it's if you have topical products, if you have oral dosage forms, whatever they may be, you can ensure that you're always going to be assigning that level of product code to those products. So for example, if you have topicals and you want to ensure topicals always start from 100 to 200 and oral dosage form starts from 200 to 300 and so on and so forth. Alternatively, we've also seen it where organizations simply start with first product's number 1, second product's number 2, and keep adding them on. It does get tricky for organizations that both manufacture and for themselves and for private label distributors, where you are both managing your own labeler code and also potentially registering NDC codes under a distributor's labeler code. That can get tricky. And what the tricky part is, those numbers aren't always going to be harmonized. So if as a manufacturer, you also distribute under your own label, and let's say you assign the product code 100 to a product, it's very unlikely if you're working with one of the large distributors here in the States that 100 product code will be available. So that's where it becomes critical to ensure that you're managing this data in a database where you can access it, see how frequently information has changed. And what a lot of our clients are doing today is utilizing the single source for drug products, a software tool to help manage their NDC codes and drug listings, and that tricky metadata for each time you have to make updates, or even a blanket no change certification of all the codes that you are managing. From there, when determining how you're going to be managing it, it gets to the metadata piece, right? So when you are managing the information, the product levels and packaging levels can get tricky. It gets especially complicated when you're looking at kit products and when you are looking at, or kit configurations, and when you are looking at the biologics industry, human prescription drugs. So those are the types of things when you should really start taking a high level overview and collaborating. So if you're not working in labeling, if you are an individual at your organization that's specifically helping with, whether it be in operations, managing the metadata that's going into these critical SPL files, it's a best practice to start collaborating early, especially when it comes to the process of harmonizing these codes with maybe a GS1 standard to comply with Drug Supply Chain Security Act requirements and so forth. So back to that kind of concept of, hey, it's our first product we're bringing to market. If it's a newly approved BLA or NDA, and you do have some of those DSCSA requirements, the best practice I've seen is to get your labeler code first, and then start contacting your issuing agency like GS1 to get that global trade identification number and your company identifier, essentially, that would be used in that GTIN harmonized with your labeler code. It's a best practice that can be done because we have seen some tricky scenarios where they can't harmonize, and then you might be managing different levels of numbers for the same product. Again, it's not something that can't be done, but it just adds complexity to something that if you had taken a moment to really manage this from the beginning, in understanding that the labeler code is what FDA requires for the actual NDC registration process, and the GTIN is what's used for that Drug Supply Chain Security Act requirement. Again, harmonizing that can just make things a lot easier on your end. Thank you for listening today, and if you have any more questions, feel free to reach out to ReadTech, and stay tuned for additional videos on these topics.